Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of.
What is Talking Taugehs gonna be about?
Alright, so Talking Taugehs will be a podcast where we break down a cappella arrangements for you in the nitty-gritty details so that all of us can learn to be better arrangers. And eventually we'll explore arrangements from other genres and other arrangements. So yeah, welcome to the first episode.
Ooh. So, what arrangement are we gonna be breaking down today?
Alright, so for this first episode, we will be breaking down my arrangement of Baby by Clean Bandit, which I arranged for NUS Resonance, which is the A Cappella CCA club of NUS. Yeah, and because I'm breaking down my own arrangement, I didn't want to be alone, so I brought along, tada,
Hi.
introduce yourself please.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I'm Alicia and I go by Alicia DC and I'm a local singer-songwriter in Singapore.
Yeah, and she's also a composition major at Yongsu Conservatory of Music, so I thought she would be able to give you some musical insights.
But you're doing most of the talking today, right?
That's true.
Right, so tell me more about Baby.
Alright, so Baby, if you listen to the original on Spotify or if you watch the YouTube MV, it has a very Latin house kind of beat, kind of rhythm and groove. And that was something that I really wanted to maintain in the arrangement because when I first listened to it, I found myself grooving and I was like, I really want to dance. So when I arranged it, I was like, yeah, the audience listening to this should dance along as well. So I really wanted to maintain that in my arrangement. And lyrically, it tells a story of the typical sad love story about the one that got away. So I also wanted to maintain a bit of that feeling in my arrangement. Yep, let's dive right into it. Alright, so diving straight into the intro, we start off with 2 bars of this beatbox solo or the vocal percussion solo that goes. Right, this beat that you hear, it actually carries on throughout the entire arrangement. So I intentionally, instead of starting with everyone just coming in on bar 1, why not have 2 bars of just the VP doing that to kind of set the tone for the rest of the arrangement and also plant it into the audience's mind so that they will remember it. And in this intro, all I wanted to do was kind of just build that tension, build that drive and that energy. And I think one really good way to do that is by manipulating the vowels that you assign to your accompaniment. So if you look at the solo here, they're not singing anything. There's no lyrics being sung, right? But I could still assign different vowels to the backing parts. So for example, here on bar 6, you can notice how the accompaniment goes from a do to a wa, while sliding up from a lower voicing to a slightly higher voicing. So it kind of matches that opening of the vowel with the voices sliding upwards. Together, I think it builds a kind of like driving of energy in direction somewhere. Yeah, so that's all I really wanted to do in this intro. Yeah. Alright, so that's the first verse. So in the original song, actually, it is very harmonically and rhythmically simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that C minor pedal called that dum 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 da, and the beat just stays in a right. So that's very simple. So I find that in sections like these, what I have room to do is actually play around more with the accompaniment in terms of its textures and the different ideas that you can use. So one example that I used here, which is to have everyone sing together on the word go, right? Go in itself, I find it's a very impactful lyric, right? Like, let's go,
I think it's up to whichever arranger finds which word of like it doesn't really it's not common sense to think that go is like the best word in the phrase to emphasize, but I think you just chose this particular word to emphasize, right?
Yeah, I just thought it was an impactful word. Yeah, but anyway, so I wanted it to be just a surprise moment of oomph right there, right? So in order to supplement, that energy that I wanted to bring out, I deliberately voice the voices in a pretty wide voicing. Right, you have the bass down here, and right, it's a pretty wide voicing compared to saying something like maybe this. This is a lot closer, right? And the first one actually had a lot of the voices in comfortable voice parts for them, where they are able to really full out sing, like not too high that they're straining, but not low that they end up sounding very softly. Yeah, so it's intentionally voiced that way so that you can have the extra oomph on the word go itself, right? And just one point to note here, even while writing homophony, right, with all four, 5 parts singing the same thing, like for example, you see the "Know About Love," right? Even though I could have stayed stagnant on just that C minor chord, for example, like "Know About Love," that would sound okay as well, but why not have some movement so that it doesn't sound too still, right? So both the soprano and the tenor actually moves just by one tone, but it just adds a little bit of movement, right?
Was it already like?
Mm.
Was it originally the same note?
Yeah, I actually just put it at the same note first, and then after that.
So like the original had the same.
No, actually the original did not even have this like harmony. I added this on my own.
But what about the melody?
The melody had that jump. Yeah.
Da 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 da.
I was down in the know about love. Yeah, it had that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that movement in the harmony was something that I added on extra on my own.
I see.
Right, just to add a little bit of direction so that it wouldn't be so stagnant, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep. So this verse ends on a 5-part homophony. I just thought that the ending lyric, "Don't know how I ever let you go," was something very powerful and strong. And I wanted to bring that out by, having all 5 voices sing at the same time, right, as one big collective. So I also intentionally voiced the solo kind of tucked in between all 5 voices. So if you look at the voicing, the sop and the mezzo, and the tenor and the bass are actually kind of encapsulating the solo line. It's stuck in between these parts, right? So that was intentional to kind of like make it sound as like one collective, one voice, rather than one solo and 4 backing voices, right? So just intentional voicing choices here. Yeah.
Another patient time. If only you were mine. But I'm already someone else's baby.
So that's the pre-chorus right there. What do you think?
It's very cluttered.
Mm-hmm.
It's very close.
In terms of voicing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that was a deliberate choice that I made to have everything kind of tucked together, right? Because if you notice, the solo is actually in a very low range here, especially for a female voice. And "Find Me" is very low
Yeah.
for a female, right? So I didn't want to do anything too crazy with the accompaniment, especially in terms of range and dynamics, because anything more than this, it will drown out the solo, especially at these low notes. And lyrically, it's also very important. "Find me another place and time." I wanted to bring these lyrics out and not just overshadow them with crazy accompaniments, right? So for the starting of the pre-chorus, I did something very simple, which is just stacking arpeggios, right? Which is breaking down the chord into different parts and then having them come in one at a time. Well, even in this 4 bars of arpeggio, I also wrote like a very kind of nice upper line melody. Do-do, 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 right? I don't know, I just thought it would be a nice way to kind of like add a little sparkle at the top. Yeah, rather than just have the same chord or the same type of chord voicing for all 4 chords.
It actually just sounds like a different arpeggio. Like not exactly the chord, like you varied it a bit. Like it kind of sounds like you were improvising a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think personally that's how I kind of write my arpeggios as well. I don't just go to the piano and play a standard C minor arpeggio, but rather I just try to experiment and see, how many different ways can I put this out and then throw them into voices.
So that's your method.
Yeah, that's how I come up with different ideas for arpeggios, right? So the pre-chorus ends on this A flat 6/9 chord. This 4 chord with a 6/9 extension is actually one of my favorite chords to use, and I felt that it gave kind of like a yearning / cozy feeling. Yeah, let's listen to it one more time.
Already someone else's baby.
Yeah, that chord right there. Yeah, with the B flat. Yeah.
Let's see.
Yep. Alright, moving on to the chorus. Chorus. Right. Any thoughts?
There's a lot of shifts in. I don't know if it's texture
Mm-hmm.
or like just like the ideas that you have. There's like a clear shift between like different parts, like using different ideas for different parts with certain emphasis on the vocal percussion at some parts and also on the backing vocals at some parts while the main melody is like kept the same.
Right. Actually, yeah, that's a great point actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, as a arranger, one of the biggest challenges is actually how can I replicate energy of a chorus, without having instruments to play around with. I'm limited in this case only by 6 voices, and people might think, oh, the 6 voices can only do so much. How can you replicate the energy of a chorus, right? So one way that I like to do that is by having the backing vocals whole notes but in very open vowels. So I deliberately wrote an R vowel here in this case, which is naturally very loud and very energetic for a singer, right? Another tip or another trick that I use is by adding counter melodies or different call and responses. So for example, on bar 30, 29, you have the la da 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 da, right? I actually used that melody before in the intro, right? Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right there.
There.
But I repeated that in the chorus as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second melody, the to say it's over, right? That's just something that I came up with on a whim. Yeah. So for the second half of the chorus, same thing. It starts off with a very open vowel, in this case, whoa, right? And then you have the baby solo going baby, whoa, and then the backing's response with someone else's baby, right? So if you notice here, the someone else's, it actually happens when the solo is taking a break or not saying anything. So like you said, the energy or the focus kind of like shifts between the solo and then the backings.
Right.
So this is kind of like what's happening here. And I think an important note for writing counter melodies is to not layer them like directly below the solo or while the solo is singing something very important, right? Because then as a collective or as a whole, it can sound very messy and you would not be able to discern like what the different parts are singing, right? And while the solo is taking a break anyway, you have that gap or that space to play with, right? So yeah, that's where you should put your counter melodies. In this case, I chose for everyone to come back together on this one syllable or one lyric baby just for the extra oomph, right? And just to wrap up the chorus, I had this very groovy come on, come on, come on, come on. This is not in the actual song, it's just something that I added on my own, right? So another tip for you guys, just because the actual song doesn't have it, doesn't mean you cannot add in your own little...
Phrases.
Yes, your phrases, your own lyrics. If it makes sense, it makes sense, right? Come on, it's like, hey, dance with me. You're telling the audience to come on and dance with me, right? And it also fits the song because the song itself is a very groovy, a very easy song to dance to.
It also fits rhythmically.
Right. So as a whole, if you look at the chorus by its own, right, the solo just sings, baby, whoa, baby, whoa. It's the same lyric, repeated 3 times just in a different melody. Yeah, on its own, that is very bare and it's very simple. But after adding all these different counter melodies and new lyrics that you've come up with yourself, it becomes a lot more interesting. And as a whole, I think it's a lot more memorable for the audience and easy for them to catch on to. Yeah. Alright, so that's the second verse. So I don't know if you've noticed by now, but between sections, I've tended to have this little gap or a little break where it's just the solo and the VP. Where it always goes, I'm already someone else's. And this happens, I think, in many of the transitions between sections.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess this is one thing that I intentionally wrote to kind of like give everyone, not just the singers, but also the audience, a kind of break, or like for them to reset between ideas, between transitions.
I agree and disagree.
Okay.
It can be perceived like that, like a break, but it can also be like an expectation that like, yes, this section has come to an end, and then the next section is coming right after.
Right, so that was actually what I was just about to say. It's also a way to build... it's just a way to kind of like, yeah, like you said, tell the audience that this section is over, right? And something new is coming, right? So that building of suspense and keeping the interest of your audience is something that is very important as an arranger also. Right, so for this verse, again, similar to the first verse, it's harmonically and rhythmically, in the original, very simple. It's just that C minor pedal on the beat, right? So in the first verse, I made it very textural, very layered in terms of the accompaniment. In this verse, in the first half, I chose to change it up.
What?
Yeah, with a halftime break. So that is changing the rhythm. Even though I have that same C minor chord, I'm doing a halftime beat now. Right. Right, so that's one thing that you can do. You can change the rhythm. And in this case, I also changed the harmony a little bit. So instead of having them sit on a C minor chord every time, I alternated between a C minor and a C minor at 9 with that clash between the D and the E flat. So it alternates between these two chords. C minor, right? So this just repeats throughout the verse actually, but this little harmonic variation is also a way that you can add some color to your arrangement. Yeah. The rest of the verse is pretty much the same. Yeah, it's just a halftime, but then instead of having the ooh-ah on the first beat, I just put it on the third beat for variation.
And then the curvy line is...
It's a scoop. Ooh-ah.
So from any pitch to the pitch you wrote, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Special note. Sherwin wrote for the soprano to transition to switch instrument from soprano to mouth trumpet. Oh no.
Right, so now we have a sudden change into Spanish. So this was in the original song. I did not completely write a Spanish verse on my own, right? But this was something that was completely new, and this groove kind of changed a little bit. So I really wanted the focus to be on the Spanish, and let my tenor have this kind of moment to shine, right? Which he had not had so far. And just have that supported by this kind of groovy bass line again with the VP. Right, it's very easy to kind of vibe along with as well. So in this verse, the accompaniment actually stays very simple. It's just dum 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 for like the whole of 8 bars.
It kind of just fits with your bass line, right?
Yeah, it's really just there to supplement the rhythm, and the rhythm section. It's really nothing special. But then after listening to everything as a whole, I was like, something's kind of missing, right? Latin, Spanish, groovy. What can I add? Mouth trumpet. Ta-da!
It's like some mariachi stuff.
Yeah, so I was like, soprano, you can do a mouth trumpet. Yeah, so the soprano in this group, she didn't know how to do it before, so she had to learn it, and she managed to pull it off, including this crazy ass downward riff at the end. Yeah, it's just a little nifty trick to spice up the arrangement a little bit. Yeah, right.
And then the way you place it also kind of matters.
That's true.
Because you put it before the C2.
Before the next chorus. Yeah. Yeah. So actually the mouth trumpet, on its own, initially it just sounds like a counter melody. And then as it progresses, it actually sings in unison with the same melody as the solo. And then at the end, it has its own big moment on its own.
Right.
Right, so just again playing with different layers and different textures. Yeah. I guess that's kind of the pre-chorus. It's more of a pre-chorus than a chorus actually. But yeah. Anyway, for this section I wanted to keep things kind of simple, but because it's leading up to the chorus, I wanted to keep things still with that little bit of energy, which is why even though the backing parts are still holding oohs, the vocal percussion is still going with a beat, but a very soft one. The right.
This reminds me of two things. It reminds me of like the classical setting where like the strings start playing like really suspenseful strings, and then there's like percussion section just slowly building tension in the background, like really quiet and like building up.
Yes.
And then there's also another reference that I'm thinking about. You know, like when you're dancing in a club and then it's EDM, and then like there's a transition, and then the kick doesn't appear until like the very, very last part. Yeah, it's like an EDM.
It's like
a and then it goes.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that's kind of the main idea of this entire section. Harmonically wise, it's a little bit more interesting. So for an example, on this bar down here, this bar 60, it's just a simple B flat to E flat cadence, right? So I could have totally just left the chords. It's just like a B flat to E flat. But since things were pretty simple, I was like, let's spice things up a bit. So on the B flat chord, I added the non-chord tone, which is the E flat, I think. Yeah. So it becomes a B flat at 11. Right, you have this clash here, right, which adds a little bit more color. And then on the E flat chord, it goes to a E flat major 9 instead of a normal E flat chord. So I'm adding the D and the F. Right. So instead of just going from this to this, right, it's kind of boring. Why not we go from this to... I think I voiced it slightly differently, but yeah. When your voices are just holding notes, right, it's a great opportunity to just throw in these non-chord tones, chord extensions, and
more
just...
color.
Yes, spiced up the color a little bit, right? Alright, so we're nearing the end of the song. This is the second chorus.
Okay.
Right. It starts off, again, pretty simple. Just the harmony, or the backing parts going dum 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 da dum 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 da. Right? So actually, if you look at the score, it's really all four parts doing the same thing at the same time. And the alto, tenor, and the bass, they don't change notes throughout the entire bar. But just because that soprano at the top has some little bit of movement, it sounds like a little bit more interesting, rather than having all four parts do the same note for the entire bar, right? So I would say if you had a choice, if you were doing this kind of homophonic harmony, if you want to add some movement, put it at the top, at the soprano line, so it's easy to hear. I mean, that's why sopranos get the melodies most of the time, right? It's very easy to hear melodic movement up there in that range. Yeah. So that's kind of it's kind of it for the chorus. The second half of the chorus is exactly the same as the first, right? With the same come on, and the same counter melodies. It's just a memorable hook for the audience to remember. Here in bar 69 as well, there's this little counter melody to fill in. Right, one that got away. Right, yeah. Just that to fill it in. Yeah, otherwise it's pretty simple.
sounded like you sampled at the very last part. It sounds
Yeah.
like you sampled their voices and pressed it on a keyboard.
Actually, that's kind of the effect I was going for.
Oh,
Yeah. So by this time, the audience has already heard the solo sing, I'm already someone else's, probably like 5 or 6 times.
yeah.
I was getting kind of bored of it as well. So I was like, why not each person sings one syllable?
What's it called? Like popcorn duet.
Yeah, popcorn. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah. So I actually got them to kind of like match their vocal tones and their pronunciation to make it sound like it was the same person singing it. Yeah, I just thought it would be like a cool idea to have. So it's kind of meant to sound like one voice, but if you look at the video carefully, it's actually like 4 different people singing it. It really sounds like a sample being pressed.
It really does.
Yeah, but that was kind of the idea that I wanted to go for.
Okay.
But other than that, the bridge is like it's really pretty simple. I think after the whole chaos of grooving and dancing and the halftime break and everything, it was time finally for both the audience and the singers to kind of have a little bit of a break. Like fully a break, not just 2 bars, because they also need time to breathe. The audience also needs time to breathe to kind of be receptive to new ideas, right? So yeah, this was just the purpose of the bridge. Yeah, that's about it.
Baby, oh, baby. I want to be my baby, oh, baby. I want to be a baby, I want to be my baby, I want to be a baby.
I'm already someone else's.
Anyway, it's the final chorus. What you think?
Some same things, some different things to elevate the energy.
Yep.
Like literally from like
Yeah. So that big
Yes.
slide there. Let me just scroll to it.
the
Yeah. Yeah, everyone starts off on a G. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Yes.
Yeah, and slides up high to their respective parts. Right. This is I think one of the few times in the arrangement where all the singers are kind of singing like right at the top of their range or like their comfortable range for all the parts. And that was like no, okay. So good point here actually, which is like if you want them to really utilize their vocal prowess, right? Don't do it all the time because these are not professional singers, and even professional singers, they can get tired of doing this every single bar, right?
or more like the reason why he doesn't want you to do it as much is because so that when we do it, it catches your attention.
Correct. Very true. Yeah, it creates kind of like a special moment on its own, right? So I just want to bring back to just the start of the chorus. Let me see if I can find it. Ah. Right, so for all the previous choruses, the VP and the bass actually comes in right on the first pulse with baby. So it goes over but for this final chorus, in order to get a little bit more impact or a little bit more oomph, right, what I did was actually delay the entrance of the beat by 2 bars ish, right, and just give the voices that one lyric to shine together, to just have their big moment, right? After that sparse entrance of the I'm already someone else's, right? To just have their baby, whoa, right, on their own, right? And then have the beat come in after that for the extra, yeah.
That's actually quite a common trick in production,
Mm.
especially at the last chorus. Like you leave things floating in the air right before the beat drops.
Cool way to add extra impact.
Yes.
Yes. And for the final chorus, again, it's pretty much the same. But instead of that, the come on, I changed the lyrics a little bit. To, I want to be a baby, oh won't you be my baby. It's kind of just like a recapitulation of the entire song and all the ideas that were used so far. Yeah. And again, with that same beat, it fits rhythmically to get the audience to dance. Finally, it ends with that bass solo. It's like a response to whatever the solos have been singing, right? one person is saying I'm already someone else's, but then suddenly the guy comes and say, actually I'm the one who is already someone else's.
Whoa, whoa,
Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa, dramatic love story. Alright, so that was it. Baby, broken down. Maybe in general, like, maybe what are one or two things that you felt like really worked or kind of helped to tie in the entire arrangement to make it what it is?
A few things. Well,
Mm.
well, it's mainly the things that you were mentioning, but if you want me to summarize it again, yes. So I think the first thing I noticed was that you use like rhythmic like breaks to
Mhm.
like mark between sections.
Yep.
And that helps a lot with not only just knowing that it's a section, but also helps a lot with the flow of the general arrangement.
Yeah.
Yeah, without overdosing on like the energy that is experienced throughout the arrangement. Yeah. And another thing is constantly checking from section to section consecutively, like, what have I already done and what can I do differently.
Yep.
Because the thing about arrangements is that arrangements are not transcriptions. Arrangements are, well, you arrange them differently in a way that you desire it to be.
Yep.
Different and unique from what the original already is. So like, I like that you keep on looking for like new ideas, be it vowels, be it even new phrases, be it the different ways you voice different voices from one another.
Yep.
Because small ideas, even though they seem kind of small, they create a very smooth and subtle change from one section to another. Yeah. And also specifically for you as an arranger, you seem to really like focusing on like the words or like how the words affect the characteristics of like each section. Yeah. Like for example, baby is like really high energy, so you really pay attention to the energy and like say, because the energy is so high, I'm gonna give these like active like beats. Whereas like at the bridge is like something like wishing, yearning, and it's just like kind of you can tell that the energy is quite low. So you keep the texture quite still. So I appreciate that like you actually paid attention to like the lyrics and conveyed that into your arrangement decisions.
Yeah. Well, that was brilliantly put. I did not know that such things could be said about my arrangement, but yeah, I guess that is what it is. Yeah. Alright, so we've come to the end of the first episode of Talking Taugehs.
Wait, 1, 2,
3.
Talking
Talking Taugehs. Anyway, stay tuned for future episodes where we'll feature arrangements from not just me but other arrangers and also different genres. And we hope that you've learned something about a cappella arrangement from this. And see ya in future episodes. Thank you to Alicia for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. And thanks to this group of wonderful singers who have allowed me to use their piece. Thank you to Rachel, Trisha, Lasha, Danish, Matthew, and Haoming from NUS Resonance for letting me use this piece and having me arrange for them. Yeah, see ya.